I'm joined now by Afshin Molavi, a senior fellow with the Foreign Policy Institute at the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. Afshin, welcome to our program.
Thank you.
Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Egypt have basically said these sanctions, this embargo is going to stay in place on Qatar. What does Tillerson have to do to break this impasse? What are the expectations here?
You know, Asieh, remember when Ronald Reagan was negotiating with the Soviet Union arms control treaty?
I was a child, but yes, I remember.
And he said, trust but verify. But the trust has been shattered. And that's the problem, because Qatar has signed 2 of these agreements in the past, secret agreements between United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain. And according to the Riyadh view and the Abu Dhabi view, Qatar has basically ignored those agreements. They would sign things and then they would go ahead and do what they said they would not do in those agreements. So it's going to take more than just one shuttle diplomacy visit to restore that trust. And that's really where we are, which is why the coalition of Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Bahrain, and Egypt said this is simply not enough to sign a document.
So one of the big grievances that the Saudi-led coalition has with Qatar is their funding of terrorism. What about the Saudi links to terrorism and extremism?
Sure. You know, I think certainly there were Saudi links to terrorism and extremism, but I think that story is very much of the 1990s, actually. You know, starting around 2003, when Saudi Arabia had their own 9/11, 5/12/2003 is widely considered Saudi Arabia's own 9/11. That's when Al-Qaeda began a series of attacks within Saudi Arabia. I think that really shook the Saudi establishment. And since then, since 2003, Saudi Arabia has been taking quite significant steps to cut off terror finance, to cut off the flow of money that was going to madrasas in the past. Because, as you rightly pointed out, Saudi Arabia was providing a very poisonous atmosphere to the broader Muslim world. But I think that has really shifted over the past decade.
And what do you make of these list of 13 demands that they've issued? And Qatar has said, thanks, but no thanks, we're not going to do this. Do you find any of these demands really realistic? Are they feasible? I mean, cutting ties with Iran, a major player in the region, kicking out Turkish troops from the country, then shutting down the huge Al Jazeera television network. Is that really going to happen?
You know, these are certainly maximalist demands, and it's hard. You know, I think what it needs to happen is for Qatar to have some kind of face-saving way out to meet some of these demands partially. But I think, Asieh, what we have to understand again is that since the trust has been shattered, the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia and Bahrain and Egypt can go on like this for decades. Look, let's not forget.
For decades?
Yes, let's not forget that Algeria closed its border with Morocco in 1994, and it's still not open, right? So that's, 23 years a border has been closed. As long as Qatar's oil continues to flow, as long as its natural gas continues to flow, Qatar will be fine economically. They'll take some hits, no doubt about it. Qatar Airways will take some hits because they had this hub model where they could fly around the world, and if they can't fly over Saudi Arabia, certainly some things happen. But this could be a fact on the ground, this isolation of Qatar, for several years.
And do you think this whole rift will push Qatar even closer to countries like Iran and Turkey?
There is that potential, certainly. We've already seen more troops coming in from Turkey. We have seen Iran contributing food to Qatar. Not really as if Qatar needs it. They're sitting on, $340 billion of cash reserves in their sovereign wealth fund. But certainly, the sense I get from the demands that we see and from talking with officials in the GCC is the relations with Iran are not really a prime issue as much as Qatar's support for the Muslim Brotherhood, Qatar's support for Islamist groups, Hamas, Qatar's support for Al-Nusra Front. I mean, I think they understand that Qatar shares a gas field with Iran, and that gas field is essentially Qatar's bank. They can't necessarily have an antagonistic relationship with Tehran.
Afshin Molavi, as always, a pleasure, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.